Unit 5 Concept and Theories of Structure. Contents 5.1 Introduction, 5.2 Organic Analogy and Structure, 5.3 Social Structure is a Reality, A.R. Radcliffe-Brown's contribution. 5.4 Social Structure refers to relations between groups, the contribution of E. Evans-Pritchard. 5.5 Social Structure is a model, contributions of Claude, Lévi-Strauss and Edmund, Leach. 5.6 Conclusions and 5.7 Further reading. Learning objectives. After going through this unit, you will be able to explain the concept of social structure, compare the theoretical contribution of Radcliffe-Brown and Evans-Pritchard, critically discuss Lévi-Strauss concept of structure. 5.1 Introduction. The term structure, Latin structura from struere, to construct, was first applied to construction. Later, during the classical period, it was used in the scientific field of biology to grasp the meaning of this often used concept in sociology and social anthropology, and now in other social sciences. Let us begin with the analogy of a horse. Irrespective of the type of community to which a house belongs, the analogy of a house, irrespective of the type of community to which a house belongs, it is divided into rooms, with each room set apart for conducting a particular set of activities. For instance, one room may be used for cooking foods and keeping raw ingredients and utensils for cooking, and it may be called the kitchen. Another room may be used for housing the idols and pictures of sacred deities and ancestors, and stacking sacred books and objects such as lamps, incense, sticks, peacock feathers, etc., and it may be called the place of worship. While another room may be used for spreading the bed, keeping clothes, money and jewelry, storing grains, as happens in rural communities, and it may be called the bedroom. In this way, depending upon the purpose, the other rooms of the house may be set aside, given some sort of specialization and name. Terms like study room, store room, guest room, toilet, bathroom, pantry, anteroom, children's room, etc. all indicates the purpose for which a particular portion of the land is marked and thus designated. Where the tract of land is less, many of these rooms may not be there, but rather different corners of the same room may be associated with the different tasks and activities. So one of its sites may be used for cooking, while other for keeping deities. Different rooms of a house are all interconnected. Passages, alleyways and the corridors link different rooms, thus facilitating mobility from one part to the other. Entry to the room is through doors, and their connections with the outside world is through doors, windows and ventilators. When all of these are shut, the room becomes a well demarcated and closed unit bearing little interaction with the external world, and when open, it is constantly interacting with the other part of the house. Each room has its own boundary, its distinctiveness, which separates it from other rooms. At the same time, it is not an isolated entity, for it is defined as a bedroom or a study room as a distinct entity in relation to the other rooms, which are also defined distinctly. In other words, the owners of the room, looking from one point of view, may, by stationing oneself in the room, is juxtaposed to its being a part of the house, and when one looks at it, by situating oneself outside it. Pursuing this analogy further, a village or a neighborhood may be described as an aggregate of houses, where each village or neighborhood maintains its wholeness at the same time it is part of the large unit. Each village or neighborhood maintains its boundary, its identity, and also has several connections, like the passages, alleyways and corridors, with other villages or neighborhoods. The relevant concepts that emerge from this analogy are of the whole, the interconnections, the boundary maintaining mechanism, the aggregation, and the vantage point of the observer. Like a house or a village or a neighborhood, a society may be conceptualized or imagined as consisted of parts. One needs to begin with this analogy because society does not have the kind of concreteness one finds in a house, village or neighborhood. In fact, the method of analogy is useful for trying to know the unknown through the known. One knows what a house is and what it looks like, and by extending its model, one tries to formulate a tentative idea of society. However, it should not be forgotten that the analogy is not homology. The idea that society is like a house does not imply that the society is a house. Thus, after drawing similarities between a society and a house, one should also look at the differences between them. For such as exercise will be direct us to the uniqueness of society, the distinct properties of society. In their attempts to formulate the idea of society, different scholars have adopted different analogies. Herbert Spencer 1873 is one of the first ones to use the analogy of building, with which we have also begun. But of all the analogies that were used in the formative stage of sociology to comprehend the idea of society, the most frequent used analogy has been of the organism. Society is like a organism, Rex 1961. In addition to the analogy of building, Spencer also develops the organic analogy, believing that this analogy will be greatly valid if we are able to show not only that society is like an organism, but also that organism is like a society. See Barnes, H.E. 1948, Harris 1968. Why organic analogy is used more than other analogies such as of the solar system and later of atomic and chemical system is because an organism is far more concrete than other systems and is easy to understand, comprehend and explain. This analogy was based to the understanding of the concept of social structure, a term used for the first time by Spencer. In this unit, we will explore the meaning of the term structure and then go on to the learning the contributions of Radcliffe-Brown, Evans-Pritchard and Lévi-Strauss to the understanding of social structure. 5.2 Organic Analogy and Structure. The principal unit of an organism is a cell which combines with other of its kind to form the tissue. An aggregate of tissues in an organ and an aggregate of organs in an organism. Thus, an organism can be broken into organs, an organ into tissues and tissues into cells, and from that later one of them can be taken up for study. In a similar fashion, the basic unit of society is a socialized individual, one who has internalized their norms and values and the way of meaningful social behavior. A collectivity of an individual is a group and several of them combine together to form a community. An aggregate of the community is called a society. As in the case of organism, a society can be broken into communities, which in turn can be divided into groups and the groups into individuals. Organic analogy is quite useful as a starting point, but it should not be regarded as an end of itself, for it breaks down at many levels. For instance, a single cell can survive. There are organisms made up of single cells, but no individual can survive alone. The most elemental unit of a human society is a dyad, that is a group of two individuals. Aristotle had said long time back, one who lives alone is either a beast or God. Organic analogy helps us to understand the concept of society and its structure, but it should not blind us to the specificities of society not found in other systems of natural and biological world. The Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary 1999 gives the three meanings of term structure: the way in which something is organized, built or put together. That example, the structure of the human body. A particular system, a pattern, procedure or institution. Example, class structure, salary structure, etc. 3. A thing made up of several parts put together in a particular way. Example, a single story structure. When a sociologist speaks of structure, he has also three meanings in his mind. By structure, he means an interconnectedness of parts, that is, the parts of a society were not isolated entities but are brought together in a set of relationships to which the term structure may be used. Everything has a structure. Unless it is there, the entity will not be able to carry out any task. It will not able to work. When its structure breaks down or is jeopardized, it stops working, becomes inert, thereby affecting the activities of the other system, because they are all interconnected. Why the parts are connected in a particular manner is because of the logical and rational relationship between them. For those who regard structure as an important analytical concept, the world is an organized entity. It comprises interconnected parts, where each part is to be studied in relationship with the other parts. To sum up, structure refers to the way in which the parts of the entity are interconnected so that the entity emerges as an integrated whole, which of the purpose of analysis can be broken down into individual parts. No dispute exists in sociology with respect to the idea that the structure means an interconnectedness of parts, but it exists as to the identity of these parts, whether these parts are individuals or groups or roles or institutions or messages. In other words, the question is which of these parts should receive our primary attention. Second, a difference of the opinion exists whether the structure is an empirical entity, something that can be seen or observed, or is an abstraction arrived at from the regularity and consistency of human behavior. Around these two ideas are built different theories of social structure. Robert Merton, 1975, is quite right in saying that the notion of social structure is polyphyletic and polymorphous, that is, it has many meaning and ideas. Section 5.3, social structure is a reality. A.R. Radcliffe-Brown's contribution. As said earlier, Spencer coined the term social structure, but did not offer a theoretical perspective on it, except for the advancing the analogy between the societies and organisms, which influenced later scholars in the developing the concept of structure and function. For instance, the Emile Durkheim in 1930 and 1895, although a staunch critic of Spencer, was greatly attracted to organic analogy and said that the idea of function is social sciences was based on analogy between the living organism and society. He used the term social morphology, by which he means that what we mean by the term social structure. Durkheim's sociology exercised an indelible impact on the British social anthropologist A.R. Radcliffe-Brown, who was a student of the diffusionist W.H.R. Rivers and had carried out his first-hand fieldwork with the Andaman Islanders from 1906 to 1908. The findings of this field study were first submitted in the form of an MA dissertation in 1910. Subsequently, it was reworked for a book published in 1922 titled The Andaman Islanders, which is regarded as one of the first important books leading to the foundation of functional approach. Besides his contribution to what he called the structural functional approach, one of his important contribution was to the understanding of the concept of social structure. As said previously, there are scholars prior to Radcliffe-Brown who had used the term social structure, but it was Radcliffe-Brown 1952 who not only defined this concept but also initiated a debate on it. Throughout his teaching, he emphasized the importance of the study of social structure. This submission of Radcliffe-Brown was closely linked to his notion of social anthropology, which he was quite willing to call, after Durkheim, comparative sociology. A natural science of society. For Radcliffe-Brown 1948, social anthropology is the theoretical nature science of human society. That is to say, social phenomena are investigated by methods similar to those used in natural and biological sciences. Each of these sciences has a subject matter that can be investigated through our senses. Thus, the object matter is empirical, which can be subjected to observation. Radcliffe-Brown pursues the analogy of natural science. All the natural sciences systematically investigate the structure of the universe as it is revealed to us through our senses. Each branch of science deals with a certain class of kind of structures. For instance, atomic physics deals with the structure of atoms, chemistry with the structure of molecules, anatomy and physiology which is the structure of organism. Then it moves further with the aim to discover the characteristic of all structures of that kind. Each science endeavors to understand a structure with which it is concerned, and then all the structures of that type are compared to discover their common characteristic. All sciences move from particular to general for understanding a structure to understanding the structure. If social anthropology is a natural science of society, then its subject matter must be amenable to observation and empirical inquiry. Social structure is what the social anthropologists study. It is the province of their inquiry. It is observable. It has a concrete reality. Radcliffe-Brown 1952 writes, social structures are just as real as our individual organism. It is clear that the Radcliffe-Brown's concept of social structure is tied to his natural science conception of social anthropology. The content of social structure. When we speak of structure, we have in mind, as said earlier, some sort of an ordered or arrangement of parts or components. A piece of musical composition has a structure and its parts are notes. Similarly, a sentence has a structure, its parts are words. So does a building, the parts of which are bricks and mortar. The basic part of the social structure is a person. Here, Radcliffe-Brown 1952 make an important distinction between an individual and a person. An individual, he is a biological organism comparing a large number of molecules organized in a complex way, which keeps on carrying out a multitude of psychological, physiological and psychological functions till the time he is alive. This aspect of human being, the individual aspect, is an object of study for biological and psychological sciences. As a person, the human being is a complex of social relationship. It is the unit of study of sociologists and social anthropologists. As a person, he is a citizen of a country, a member of family, a supporter of political party, a follower of religious cult, a worker in a factory, a resident of a neighborhood, and so on. Each of these positions the person occupies denote a social relationship because each position is related to another position. A person is a member of a family in relation to the other members, and the set of interrelationship of the members of a family constitute its structure. Each person occupies therefore a place in a social structure. Radcliffe-Brown uses the term social personality for the position a human being occupies in a social structure. It, however, does not imply that the position remains the same throughout the life of an individual, for it's changed over time. New positions are added or old are deleted. We study persons in terms of social structure, and we study social structures in terms of persons who are the unit of what is it composed, who are the unit of what it is composed. Society is not a haphazard conjunction of persons rather than an organized system where norms and values cannot control the relationship between the persons. A person knows how he is expected to behave according to these norms and values, and he is justified in expecting that other person should do the same. Radcliffe-Brown includes the following two aspects within the social structure. 1. All social relationship of persons to person, that is interpersonal relationship. For example, the kinship structure of any society consists a number of dyadic relations such as father and son, mother and daughter, brother and sister, son, etc. The differentiation of individual and of class by their social role. For instance, the relationship between men and women, chief and commoners, employees and employers, employers and employees, etc. are aspects of social structure, for they determine social relationship between people. In both cases, we are in fact concerned with the relationship between persons, which norms and values of that society conditions. Bringing this together, Radcliffe-Brown says that the social structure is that concrete reality that comprises the set of actually existing relationships at a given moment of time, which link together certain human beings. We can conduct direct observation of social structure. We can see the actually existing relationships, describe and classify them, and understand the relationship of persons with others. Social structure is observable, empirical, and fully amenable to study by methods of natural and biological sciences. Structure type. When a social anthropologist carries out his fieldwork in a particular territory defined society, what he actually investigates is social structure. That is, an actual existing concrete reality to be directly observed, but from what he observes, he abstracts a general picture of that society. In this context, Radcliffe-Brown makes a distinction between the social structure and structural type or form. This distinction is also related with Radcliffe-Brown's conception of science and of social anthropology as a natural science of society. He says that as distinguished from history or biography, science is not concerned with the particular or unique. It is a concern rather with the general, with propositions that apply to the entire phenomenon. We are concerned with, he says, the form of the structure. Say in the study of Australian tribe, an anthropologist is concerned with the relationship between the mother's brother and sister's son. He observes several instances of this relationship in their actual context, from which he abstracts its general or normal form, which is largely invariant. If social structure is bound by factors of time and space varying from one context to another, structural type is general and invariant. Social structure continues over time, a kind of continuity that Radcliffe-Brown calls dynamic continuity. It is like the organic structure of a living body. A living body constantly renews itself by replacing its cells and energy levels. In the same way, the actual social life renews the social structure. Relationship between people change over time. New members are recruited in a society because of birth or immigration, while the social structure changes over time, where remains an underlying continuity and relative constancy which designates its structural form. Reflections and actions 5.1. What does Radcliffe-Brown mean by dynamic continuity? This certainty does not imply that the structural form is static. It also changes, sometimes gradually, sometimes with suddenness, as happens in case of revolution. But even then, some kind of a continuity of structure is maintained. Our job as a sociologist and a social anthropologist is to discover the structure form of the society. It is to move from one particular to general, or in the language of Radcliffe-Brown, from idiographic to nomothetic. While the former designates a specific social structure, the latter is a structure form. While the former requires an intensive study of the single society, the latter is an abstraction of the form of that society. Also, the study of a single society needs to be compared with the similar studies of other society. This process, systematically carried out, and can lead us to the discovery of a general laws that applies to human society as a whole. For Radcliffe-Brown, the various steps of reaching the general laws are: 1. Intensive study of social structure using the standard anthropological procedures. Abstraction from this its structural type, comparing the structural type of social structure with the structural type of other social structures by rigorously using the comparative method. 4. Arriving at the laws of society, the variant propositions that explain human behavior in a diverse social situations. For Radcliffe-Brown, there is only one method of social anthropology, that is the comparative method. For its help us to move from one particular to the general. Social structure is what we study, but what we arrive at is the structural type. The society and social structure. Radcliffe-Brown's attempt was praiseworthy, for it was the first rigorous attempt to define the concept of social structure rather than just taking it meaning for granted. However, it is led to many questions of confusions. If social structure is a collectivity of interpersonal relationship, real and observable, then what is society? Do we study society and find its structure? In his letter to Claude Lévi-Strauss, Radcliffe-Brown gave the following example. When I pick up a particular seashell on the beach, I recognize it as having a particular structure. The question that immediately comes in our mind is that what do I study, the seashell or its structure? Pursuing the example further, Radcliffe-Brown says, I may say there is a form of structure characteristic of this species. Here, do I describe the structure of each of this shell and then subject their structures to comparison, or do I assume that since they all happen to be seashells, they will have a similar structure? Further, Radcliffe-Brown writes, by examining a number of different species, I may be able to recognize a certain general structure of principle, that of a helix, which would be expressed by means of logarithmic equations. Do I compare different species of seashells to arrive at their general structural form, or do I compare the structural form of each of the species or seashells to reach the structural form that is common to all? These questions already shown that while there is no confusion between the categories on particular and general, confusion prevails with respect to the distinctions between society and social structures, social life and social structures, and the structural form of a social structure and the structural form of a social structures. One more observation: what Radcliffe-Brown understand by the term structural type is what many understand by the term social structure, and what Radcliffe-Brown calls social structure is what many would call society. 5.4 Social structure refers to relationship between groups. The contribution of Evans-Pritchard. Radcliffe-Brown paper on social structure, originally the presidential address to the Royal Anthropological Institute of Great Britain and Ireland in 1940, referred to the Evans-Pritchard's idea of social structure. While Radcliffe-Brown did not disagree with the Evans-Pritchard use of social structure, he found it more useful to include under the term social structure a good deal more than what Evans-Pritchard had included. Evans-Pritchard delineated his concept of social structure in the last section of the last chapter of this book, The Newer, 1940. Evans-Pritchard carried out a piece of intensive field work with the Newer of Sudan. In his first monograph on them, he tried to describe Newer society on a more abstract plane of analysis than was usual at that time because of a lack of proper theory. Evans-Pritchard looked for much theory in the work on the Newer, although many of his ideas that exercise impact on sociology and social anthropology developed later. In his monograph on Newer, the first gives an account of the importance of cattle for the life of the people he had studied, the ecological system which they define themselves, conditions, their territorial distribution and transhumance, the newer concept of life. The newer concepts of time and space arise largely from their patterns of livelihood. Then Evans-Pritchard examines the territorial sections which form their political system. In the absence of a centralized political authority, the newer are a good example of stateless, acephalous society. Their discussion has given rise to the concept of segmentary political system, where social order is largely a function of the position and balance of different sections of the society. Evans-Pritchard's descriptions of the elements of the newer society and their interrelationship guided him to the concept of social structure. Instead of beginning with the idea of a person, as did Radcliffe-Brown, he began with viewing social structure in terms of groups. To quote him in 1940, page 262. By the social structure, we mean relationship between the groups which have a high degree of consistency and constancy. Structure is an organized combination of groups. Individuals come and go. They are recruited and eliminated over time, but the group remains the same. For generation after generation of group of people pass through them. The process of life and death conditions individuals, but the structure of society endures. It is clear that for Evans-Pritchard, a social structure deals with units which are largely invariant, that is group. What Radcliffe-Brown means by structural form is what Evans-Pritchard means by social structure. The group considered for describing social structure may be called structural groups. For example, of which among the newest are territorial groups, lineages, and age setters. Even Pritchard does not consider the family as a structural group. It is because he thinks that the family does not have the kind of consistency which other groups have. A family disappears at the death of its members and a few family comes to existence. However, it does not imply that the family is less important, for it is essential for the preservation of the structure. 1940 and 262 page. New members are born into the family which maintain the system and its continuity. This formulations of structure Evans-Pritchard clarified does not imply that the groups consistency and constant that constituent with the structure of the static territorial lineage and the age set system do change, but slowly, and there is always the same kind of interrelationship between their segments. Reflections on the examples of newer Evans-Pritchard says that there is the tribe is not a haphazard congregations of residential unit. Every local group is segmented and these segments are fused in a relationship to other people. Because of this, each unit can only be defined in terms of the whole system. One by conceptualize a society as a system of groups in which relationship exists between groups of person, and this relationship are structural relationship. Thus the structure is a relation between groups. These relations can be spoken of in terms of a system. Evans-Pritchard considered kinship relation as a kinship system, or one may speak or political relation as a political system. This brings us to the issue of defining a group. For Evans-Pritchard, a congregation of people who consider themselves as a distinct unit in relationship to the other units. The members of the group have a discernible sense of identity that they are defined so by other groups. Among the members of a group existing reciprocal obligations, they are expected to fuse together whenever they encounter an issue pertaining to their group or one of its members. The vengeance groups are formed on this basis. Their aim is to avenge the death of one of their members. In a case of homicide, the members of the group of the slain become one as opposed to the members of the group of the slayer. Thus emerge two structurally equivalent and mutually opposite groups. In this sense, the segment of a tribe, a lineage, and the age set are all examples of groups. However, a man's kindness does not constitute a group, and so do the members of a neighboring tribe or the strangers. Thus, sum up for Evans-Pritchard, the parts of social structure among which structural relationships are to be described are groups that endure our time. Social structure is not an empirical entity for him. For the study of the social relationship of people, we remove we move on to an understanding of their groups. When we describe the relationship between groups, we are already on our way of describing their social structure. Therefore, a social structure is an anthropologist's abstraction from the existing reality. It should be kept in mind here that of Evans-Pritchard 1951, a social anthropology is not a branch of natural science as it is of Radcliffe-Brown, but it is a kind of historiography. Its kinship is with history and not natural and biological sciences. (5.5) Social structure is a model. Contributions of Claude, Lévi-Strauss and Edmund Leach. Perhaps the most provocative and debatable contributions to the concept of social structure was that of Claude Lévi-Strauss, the French structuralist, who is famous for his ingenious cross-cultural analysis of myths and kinship systems. E for functionalism, society is a kind of living creature consisting of parts which can be dissected and distinguished. For structuralism, it is the analogy for language that help us in conceptualizing society. From the study of given piece of language, the linguistic tries to arrive at its grammar, the underlying rules which make an expression meaningful, although the speakers of that language may not know about it. Similarly, the structuralist from a given piece of social behavior tries to infer its underlying structure. In structuralism, the shift is from observable behavior to structure, from organic analogy to language. Bernard 2000. Further, structuralism submits that the set of relationship between different parts can be transformed into something that appears to be different from what it was earlier. It is the idea of transformation of one into another that lies at the core of structuralism rather than the quality of relationship. Edmund Leach 1968 has given a good example to illustrate this. A piece of music can be transformed into a varieties of ways. It is written down, playing of a piano, recording on a phonographic record, transmitted over the radio, and finally placed back at the audience. In each case, the piece of music passes through a whole series of transformations. It appears as a printed note, as a pattern of finger movements, as sound waves, as modulus of the grooves of a piece of backlight, and electromagnetic vibration, and so on. But what is common to all these manifestations of music, one different from the other, and each conditions by itself on rules, is their structure in a similar fashion, where while different societies vary, what remains invariant and not common to them is their structure. Lévi-Strauss 1963 aptly showed this is one of his studies, where he compared the totemic society of Australian Aborigines with India caste system, and found that both of them had the same structure. If for Radcliffe-Brown structure is observable, for Lévi-Strauss it is an abstract concept. If for Radcliffe-Brown what persists is the structure of a particular society at a particular point of time and place, for Lévi-Strauss what permits is the structure of the entire human society. In his celebrated essay in 1953 in A.L. Carober's Anthropology Today, titled Social Structure, Lévi-Strauss says that the social structure is not a field of study, it is not a province of inquiry. It is an explanatory method and can be used in any kind of social structures. In opposition to Radcliffe-Brown, Lévi-Strauss says that the term social structure has nothing to do with empirical reality. It refers to the models that are built up from the empirical reality. He writes the object of society structure study is to understand social structure with the help of models. Social structure is a model, it is a method of study. Here Lévi-Strauss distinguished the concept of social structure from that of social relationship. The latter are the raw data of social experience. They have the relationship between people, empirical and observable. It is from social relationship that model comprising the social structure are built. Although the models are built from raw empirical reality, they cannot be reduced for it. The essence of social relationship in a given society can be described, but the social structure is an anthropologist's construction built for the purpose of analysis. Reflections and actions 5.2. How does Lévi-Strauss distinguish between the concept of social structure and social relations? Lévi-Strauss make the three different distinctions. First, between the observation and experimentation of one model. Second, the consciousness and unconscious character of the models. And the third, between the mechanical and statistical methods. The observation of social relationship and the construction of models after these facts need to be distinguished from experiments on models. By experimentation, Lévi-Strauss says that the controlled comparisons of models of the same or of the different kind with an intention to identify the model that accounts best for the observed fact. In a structural system, the first step is to observe the facts without any bias, then to describe them in a relationship to themselves and in relationship to the whole. For these models are constructed, and in the final analysis the best model is chosen. This distinction is with the reference to the anthropologist who studies society. By comparison, the distinctions between consciousness and consciousness model is made with reference to the society under study. Consciousness model, also known as the homemade models and norms that are the insiders model, they are those according to which the society views itself. Underneath these models are deep structures, the unconscious models, which are the society does not perceive directly or consciously. Anthropologists principally work with the models that they construct from the deep lying phenomena rather than with the conscious models. It is because Lévi-Strauss says the aim of conscious model is to perpetuate the phenomena and not to explain it. But from this we should not infer the conscious model and could be dismissed for, in some cases they are far more accurate than those that anthropologists built. Even when consciousness models are inaccurate, they give us to deep structures. Let us now come to the last distinction. The classic formulation of mechanical models is that they are those models which lies on the same scale as the phenomenon is, and when the model and the phenomenon lies on a different scale, they are called statistical models. Unfortunately, critics have noticed Lévi-Strauss does not explain the meaning of the same scale, but from the example he has given, it seems that he is not concerned with the quantitative differences between what people say and what they do. To make it clear, Lévi-Strauss give the examples of the laws of marriage. When there is no difference between marriage rules and social grouping, the two are placed over the same scale. The model formed with the will be mechanical, and when several structures affected the system of marriage and people have no option but to deviate from the rule, the model formed will be statistical. Box 5.2, Edmund Leach on social structure. The British anthropologist Edmund Leach 1954-1961 also made a significant contribution to the idea of social structure as model, although there are many significant differences between the approaches of Lévi-Strauss and Leach to structuralism. For instance, whereas Lévi-Strauss is interested in unearthing the universal structures applicable to all human societies in all point of time, Leach applies to the method of structuralism to understand the local or regional structures. Because of this some term Leach's approach neo-structural, Cooper 1996. Leach has formulated a conception of social structure that is essentially the same as Lévi-Strauss, Nutini 1970. Like Lévi-Strauss, Leach divides the social universe into different epistemological categories: the raw day, of social structure, that is social relationship and the models that are built from it. Models are not empirical, they are the logical constituents in the mind of the anthropologist. Like Lévi-Strauss, each also arise at the distinction between the mechanical and statical models, that is models built respectively on what people say and what people do, but he calls mechanical models jural rules and statical models statical norms. The meaning Leach give us to journal rules and statical norms in is essential the same which Lévi-Strauss gives to mechanical and statical models. But two important difference stands out. First, for Lévi-Strauss, both mechanical and statical methods are of roughly equal analytical value and they complement each other. For Leach, jury rules and statical norms should be treated as separate frames of reference. In an analysis, the statical norms should have priorities over the jury rules. We should begin our study with the actual behavior of people, the deviations that occurs, and the conformity they achieve. Second, Leach point out that mechanical models or jural rules are quantitative rules of behavior. Sanctions support them. Sanctions support them, and they have the power of coercion. Statical models or norms are only statical averages of individual behavior. They do not have any coercive power. 5.6 Conclusion. The concept of social structure has been a pleasant puzzle. To remember the words of A.L. Kroeber, 1948, to which at one time almost every anthropologist and sociologist tried to make a contribution, either by drawing attention to the part or parts for society that seem immoral to be other, or by lending support to an already existing idea or theory of social structure. As noticed in the beginning, the debate concerning social structure has centered around two issues, among which parts of society are their structure relations, and is social structure real or a model, which is the investigation constructs. Of the two major points opinions of social structure, Lévi-Strauss is closely connected to his method structuralism. Social structure is a model devised for undertaking the study of social behavior, relationship and experiences. For Radcliffe-Brown, social structure is an empirical entity constituting the subject matter of social anthropology and sociology. In his letter to Lévi-Strauss and Radcliffe expressed his agreement with the former's concept of social structure and the confusion clouding the idea of social structure as a model. Radcliffe-Brown also thought that what meant by the term usual structure was what Lévi-Strauss' term model implied. A concept of social structure that Australian anthropologist S.F. Nadal proposes tries to be combine the views of both Radcliffe-Brown and Lévi-Strauss. In his posthumously published The Theory of Social Structure 1951, Nadal disagrees with Radcliffe-Brown's idea that social structure is an observatory entity, but it is an abstraction from it. At the same time, he rejects Lévi-Strauss' view that the social structure has nothing to do with empirical reality from Radcliffe-Brown. He borrows the idea that each person occupies a position in the social structure, but from an empirical level of interpersonal interactions, he moves to a level of abstraction where the person becomes the actor who plays a role with respect to others. This abstraction, however, does not imply that it lost touch with reality. Nadal writes, I consider social structure or whatever degree of refinement to be still the social reality itself or an aspect of it, not the logic behind it. For Nadal, the components of social structure are roles and the patterns or design of interconnected roles constitutes the social structure of a society. He defines of social structure is as follows. We arrive at the structure of socials through abstracting from the concrete population and its behavior, the pattern of or network, the system or the relationship between the actor in their capacity of playing roles relative to one another. Besides Nadal, some other sociologists have also emphasized the importance on roles in defining the structure. Parson 1961, for example, says that the structure of social system is defined with respect to the institutionalized pattern of normal culture. Norms vary according to first the position of the actors in the active situation, and second the type of the activity. Norms defines rules with the corresponding rules of behavior, and they also constitute institutions. The aim of social structure is to regulate human behavior. In his conception of social structure, Peter Blow also speaks of the social positions among which the population is described. Some of these concepts of social structure have been put to test in empirical situation. For instance, Blow and Schwartz in 1984 applied Blow's ideas to understand real life. Further reading. Bernard Allen 2000, History and Theory in Anthropology. Harris Marvin 1968, The Rise of Anthropological Theory, A History of Theories of Culture. Merton 1975, Structural Analysis in Sociology, and also approaches to the study on social structure. Nadal of 1957, The Theory of Social Structure, London. References. There is also given many references. Bernard Allen, History and the Theory of Anthropology. Berners H.E., Historical Sociology, Its Origins and Development. Berners R.H., 2001, Structuralism. Valo P.M. 1997, Inequality and Heterogeneity. And Blau P.M. and Joe Schwartz 1984, Cross-Cutting Social Circles. And Durkheim Emily in 1938, The Rules of the Sociological Method. And Evans-Pritchard E.E., The Newer Description of the Models of Livelihood and Political Institutions of a Nilotic People. And in Social Anthropology, Harris Marvin 1968, The Rise of Anthropological Theory. Korber L. 1940, Anthropology, New York. Cooper Adam 1969, Anthropologists and Anthropology. And Cooper Adam in 1977, The Social Anthropology of Radcliffe-Brown. Leach and Edmund 1954, Political System of Highlight Burma. 1961, Rethinking Anthropology. 1962, Social Structure. An International Encyclopedia for Social Sciences, Volume 14, Macmillan Co. Another Free Press, also available to read. And there is many more books. Lévi-Strauss, Claude, Social Structure, Today's Chicago University Press, and many Merton, R.K. 1970, Structural Analysis in Sociology. Nadal SF, The Theory of Social Structure. Nijitani Hungo 1970, The Sole Consideration on the Nature of Social Structure and Model Building. And Oxford Learner's Dictionary, what is the meaning? The Parson Talcott 1916, Outline of the Social System. Radcliffe-Brown 1922, The Andaman Islanders. And in 1948, The Natural Sciences Society, the New York Press. 1950, Structural and Functional in Primitive Society, Essays and Articles. Rex John 1961, The Key Problem of Sociological Theory. And Spencer Herbert in 1973, The Study of Sociology. These are the references available in this unit number 5, Concept and Theories of Structure. Thank you.